This is a quick book review of Misery by Stephen King. Quick side note, back in 2021, I started this TikTok with the intention of it being just for book reviews and more specifically, mainly Stephen King reviews, and I intended for it to be faceless. So this is a bit of a throwback for me, so to speak. If you look at some of my earlier videos on this page, you'll find quite a few Stephen King reviews. I've read a lot of Stephen King, and for one reason or another, I was holding off reading Misery. But I shouldn't be surprised that now that I finish it, it's definitely one of my favorite Stephen King books. I'm not sure if it made my top 5 or not. I'd have to think about it, but I definitely think it cracked my top 10. Wow. You would expect Stephen King's scariest work to be a story with a supernatural monster or villain, but Annie Wilkes isn't necessarily supernatural at all, and she is one of the most terrifying villains I've ever read. And it's because she resembles a real-life psychopath. You know, this is someone that could exist in real life, and her tics and the things that make her her, and, you know, using phrases like cockadoodie instead of swear words and things of that nature, it makes her feel real. And that's one thing that I always tell people when it comes to making characters feel like they're jumping off the page and they could be real. I don't really think there's authors much better than Stephen King when it comes to that. You know, this plot, if you think about it in just plot points, it's not that crazy. It's not that even interesting on the surface. Well, it's interesting, but it's not that unique on the surface, even for the time that it was written, which this book was written in the late 80s, I believe 87 or 88. And even all of that being the case, if you look at the plot for what it is, you know, it's not necessarily masterful, but the way that King makes you care about Paul and the way that he fleshes out Annie, most of this book takes place in the same room, and it's one of the most interesting books that I've read in a long time. And that says a lot about King. I mean, honestly, his masterfulness at interiority and, you know, internal thought and getting inside Paul's head and really feeling, you know, what he's feeling, which is desperation to it, you know, in a lot of ways. But one thing I like about Misery is that Paul's not some, you know, Superman by any means. He's a normal guy, and the way that he reacts to the terrible and gruesome situation that he's in definitely reflects how a normal person would go about this. And I mean, he does try to get a one-up on Annie in multiple, you know, cases, and you come to find that Annie is actually smarter than she appears to be. And then, man, right before the third act starts, when there's a bombshell on everything that Annie has done in the past. No spoilers, but kind of spoiler-y. It is insane. It definitely threw me off of just how much she actually did in her past and how terrible she really is. And all that being said, if you have a stomach that can't handle a lot, there are 2 scenes in this book that are absolutely gruesome, but I really love the way that King uses his cinematic approach to describing the scenes, describing the setting, and, you know, the way the characters feel, and, you know, just what happens, whether it's, you know, the blood spraying in the face or how the fire reflects off their face. And there's a million examples, but I just, you know, I am just surprised at how invested I was in finishing this book. I usually take a long time to read a book, for the most part, but I flew through this one in like a week. It's not super long. It's as compared to other Stephen King books, it's about the size of a regular thriller, but it's a great read. You know, I was invested, and if you really just want to jump into a scary story that's written very well, there's a reason why Misery is considered such a classic.